Imagine opening a stock trading app and buying shares in a company that has its own army, collects taxes, signs international treaties, mints coins, and governs millions of people. It sounds impossible today, a corporate fantasy or perhaps a dystopian nightmare. But more than 250 years ago, that's exactly what the British East India Company became. This wasn't a nation, nor was it a government. It was a publicly chartered corporation born from a humble group of London merchants that would unintentionally assemble one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. Its rise reshaped global trade, transformed an entire subcontinent, and forever changed the relationship between corporations and political power. How did a trading company, no different in its initial ambition from any modern venture-seeking profit, evolve into an entity so vast, so powerful that it wielded sovereign authority, only to be dismantled by the very nation that birthed it? The answer lies in a story of ambition, accident, and unprecedented power. The year is 1600. Queen Elizabeth II, nearing the end of her reign, grants a royal charter to a group of London merchants. Their goal is simple: to break into the lucrative East Indies spice trade, dominated by the Portuguese and Dutch. This new entity, the East India Company, is a joint stock company, meaning ordinary investors could buy shares, betting on exotic goods like pepper and cinnamon. It was a business venture, pure and simple, granted a monopoly on English trade with the East. In 1608, the company's first ships finally reached India, cautiously establishing small trading posts, or factories, at ports like Surat. These weren't colonial outposts yet, merely warehouses and offices, reliant on the good graces of the mighty Mughal Empire. By 1618, an English diplomat, Sir Thomas Roe, had successfully secured formal trading privileges from the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, allowing the company to legally expand its operations. Over the next decades, the company slowly grew, establishing key settlements, including one in 1690 that would become Calcutta, a crucial administrative hub. They traded in textiles, silk, saltpeter, and of course spices, slowly weaving themselves into the fabric of Indian commerce. They were still just merchants, albeit ambitious ones, navigating a complex world of powerful local rulers. But beneath the surface of commerce, something far more transformative was brewing. As the 18th century dawned, the Mughal Empire, once an indomitable force, began to fracture. Local rulers, known as Nawabs, grew increasingly autonomous, and the power vacuum created an irresistible opportunity. The company, initially interested only in trade, found itself drawn into the intricate, often violent politics of the subcontinent. Protecting its trading interests meant building fortifications, then hiring guards, then training soldiers. This was an unforeseen, organic expansion of power, driven by the need for security and stability. Soon these guards became a private army, paid for by the company's shareholders. This was the nascent stage of an astonishing transformation, a commercial enterprise beginning to assume the attributes of a state. The critical tension was now clear. How far would a company go to protect its bottom line, especially when its own armed forces could reshape the political landscape? The stakes intensified dramatically in 1757. A young, ambitious Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, saw the company's growing military presence as a threat to his sovereignty. He moved to assert control, seizing the company's Calcutta factory. In response, a ruthlessly effective company officer, Robert Clive, led a combined force of company sepoys and British regulars against the Nawab's vastly larger army at the Battle of Plassey. Through a mix of military prowess and strategic defection orchestrated by Clive, the company secured a decisive victory. Plassey was more than a battle, it was an earthquake. It marked the moment a trading company transitioned from a commercial entity into a territorial power. 8 years later, in 1765, the Mughal emperor, now a shadow of his former self, granted the company, the Diwani, the right to collect land revenue in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This wasn't merely a business deal, it was the ultimate power transfer. The company was now collecting taxes from millions of people. controlling the purse strings of an entire region. Its income swelled, its influence became absolute, and the shareholders in London, who had initially sought spices, now owned a burgeoning empire. Their army, once a protective force, now numbered over 260,000 soldiers by the mid-19th century, larger than the British army itself. They minted their own coins, negotiated treaties with Indian rulers as if they were sovereign states, and commanded a sprawling bureaucracy. But this unchecked power, this corporate sovereignty, came with a devastating cost. The very efficiency of the company's revenue collection system, designed to maximize profits for distant shareholders, proved catastrophic for the millions under its rule. In 1770, Bengal was struck by a famine of unprecedented scale. As crops failed, the company's rigid tax demands remained, often enforced with brutal efficiency. Estimates suggest that between 7 and 10 million people perished. The very land that now generated untold wealth for London investors became a graveyard. News of the famine, coupled with widespread reports of company officials amassing vast personal fortunes through corruption, sent shockwaves through Britain. How could a company chartered to trade be responsible for such a colossal human tragedy? This wasn't just a business problem. It was a moral crisis, forcing Parliament to confront the monstrous creation it had unwittingly unleashed. The outcry in Britain grew deafening. Parliament, realizing the company had become too powerful, too corrupt, and too vital to ignore, began to intervene. The Regulating Act of 1773 was the first attempt to rein in the corporate behemoth, introducing government oversight and appointing Warren Hastings as the first Governor-General of Bengal. This marked the beginning of a long, arduous struggle for control between the company and the British Crown. But even as Parliament chipped away at its autonomy, the company's territorial expansion in India continued almost unabated. The irony was profound. While its commercial monopoly was gradually dismantled, completely ending with the Charter Act of 1833, its governmental functions, its sheer imperial reach only grew. Then in 1857, the simmering discontent finally erupted. The Indian Rebellion, a monumental uprising fueled by grievances from company policies, economic exploitation, military discontent, and cultural insensitivity, swept across northern India. It challenged company rule to its core, pushing it to the brink. The rebellion was brutally suppressed, but it laid bare the fundamental instability of a subcontinent ruled by a corporation. The rebellion of 1857 sealed the company's fate. The British government could no longer tolerate a private entity wielding such immense, unstable power over millions. In 1858, Parliament passed the Government of India Act, formally transferring all administrative powers, territories and armies from the East India Company to the British Crown. This moment marked the official beginning of the British Raj, direct rule from London. The company, stripped of its governmental authority, lingered as a shadow of its former self, overseeing minor functions until it was formally dissolved in 1874. From a handful of merchants seeking spices, it had grown into an empire, then collapsed under its own weight, absorbed by the very state that had granted its initial charter. The story of the East India Company is a stark, unsettling lesson in the unintended consequences of unchecked corporate power. It shows how the pursuit of profit, when unconstrained by clear boundaries, can morph into something far grander and more terrifying than its founders ever imagined. This was a corporation that evolved beyond mere commerce, assembling an army larger than many nations, collecting taxes from millions, and wielding the powers of a sovereign state, a phenomenon arguably never seen before or since. The company's rise and fall forces us to ask critical questions about accountability, the limits of corporate ambition, and the fragile line between economic power and political control. In an age where multinational corporations wield immense influence, the echoes of the East India Company serve as a powerful historical precedent, a reminder of what happens when the balance shifts and shareholders, not citizens, hold the ultimate keys to an empire. What other historical entities, or hidden systems have shaped our world in profound ways we rarely consider? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this exploration compelling, consider subscribing for more stories that uncover the hidden forces of history.